Okay, so welcome everyone. We have obviously moved to the virtual plane, given all the restrictions right now. Hope everyone is staying safe at home, and yeah, we're really excited about today's session. We are going to have two speakers later on today, and I'd love to do a quick intro with everyone now, and obviously we can take it away in a few minutes, so I won't take too much of your time. Just to reiterate, we hope everyone is safe, healthy, happy, sane. We know that this is a totally unprecedented time, and you know, our hearts go out to everyone that's been affected. And we're so glad that you're all taking some time today to join us. So I'll be doing the intros today. We're gonna have clinical lab data. So obviously the theme for today's session is COVID related projects. We're gonna have two speakers, Jaclyn and Kait, who are currently working on projects. So for the first portion, we're gonna have Jaclyn speak. For the second, we'll have Kait. We're gonna open it up for Q&A at 6:30, so we'll have plenty of time for questions, and that way we're not feeling too pressed. Obviously, I want to introduce the team. I'm so proud of the New York City chapter. I feel like the last few events we've had have been super strong, and now with this unknown time, we're adjusting as we do, and we've actually had two new members join since our last event. So I'll quickly introduce everyone. Of course, Anne Bodie, my co-lead. She is, sorry, just opening things up here. She is Equity Research Associate at Wells Fargo, and she's rocking it here in the New York City chapter. Tay, who's one of our new members, is the Community Coordinator. She is over at Eidolon Communications, and yeah, she was actually one of our speakers last time, and she's so awesome, and we're so happy to have her. Jaclyn, who's one of our speakers tonight, is a PR coordinator and data quality assurance analyst at Prognosis Health. Kait is our wonderful creative strategy and growth manager. She is over at VSB Global, and Crystal Sue, who's also one of our new members. Welcome. She's outreach coordinator here, and she's also at Black and Veatch. Veatch. Anyway, so yes, we're so happy to have our new members, and our team has been super strong, and we just want to keep having events for you all. You know, obviously we all joined Women in Data because we're passionate about increasing diversity and working for an organization that's doing that. And now more than ever, you know, maybe COVID is something that's going to accelerate some of these changes, and hopefully this appetite for increasing diversity and giving people the flexibility that they need. And we want to be a resource for anybody that's coming into the field and is interested. And obviously all those people that are coming into the field, you know, we've got a few layers, you know, of involvement. We've got newbies that, you know, maybe are still in high school, or, you know, don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and are excited by data and this big bustling community. We've got people like myself who have come from you know, previous careers and are transitioning in their careers later on. And of course we have people that have really spent decades you know, in this field and are really thought leaders and you know, pillars really of our community here. So, you know, we want to be welcome to everyone, and we are blessed because we have amazing sponsors and a lot of support. You know, we're kind of all over now, and it's really been nice to be a part of that blossoming. And obviously this year, you know, I wrote a blog post recently about this because I was like, wow, you know, not that we haven't been globalizing for a while, obviously we have, but now it's like, it really just feels like we're in this global community, and we're experiencing coronavirus at the same time, and it really just echoes that, we are kind of part of this global family. And this was actually the year that we expanded 3 new chapters in Trinidad and Tobago, in India, and in Kenya. So that's really exciting. We had British Columbia and Vancouver for some time, but we've broken out of North America. So yay. So I will introduce tonight's speakers. Jaclyn Fink, she works as a data quality assurance analyst at Prognosis Health. She's going to be walking us through a project that she's been working on. And, this really we wanted this to be the focus of our first virtual meeting, is like, how can we bring in real life examples of data, COVID related projects that the people in our network are working on, and what can they share with us about that. So I'm super excited to hear what Jaclyn has to share with us tonight. And then we also have Kait Arnold, who's at VSP Global, and she's an analytics engineer, she's going to be walking us through an analytics project that she's been working on as well. So I'm just really excited to sit back. I want to welcome you all. And I hope you enjoy tonight's session, and we'll definitely be cranking out some more of these. And the Greater Women in Data has also got a lot of awesome webinars and online resources right now too. So if you've got free time, please check it out. So I will hand it over to Jaclyn now.
Okay, thank you, Irene. So yeah, I'm going to be speaking today about how Prognosis is using lab data to aid in coronavirus relief. So I just wanted to start with a little definition of what Prognosis is, because I think that will help contextualize the rest of the presentation and really pull it all together. So Prognosis is a healthcare analytics company that's leveraging AI with clinical lab test data in order to help companies predict disease and drive earlier clinical decisions. So our job is essentially to transform messy clinical lab data into a more consistent and easy to read format for our clients so that they can gain insights more readily from the data. And at Prognosis, we currently have a database of 29 billion lab records and 250 million patients. And you can see in the little graphical images at the bottom, these are some examples of what our clients are looking to monitor in patient data. So on the bottom left, you can see that this is an example of a patient journey, and the client may be interested in when the patient was diagnosed, what treatments they went on, how their lab results vary over time. So is this treatment improving the patient's health? Is their condition getting worse? And we can do this with lab data alone. So that's the importance of using lab data and why clients want this. Okay, so next I'm going to go over just the overview of my entire presentation. So I'm going to start with an introduction to clinical laboratory data for those who may not be familiar with what it really is. And then I'm going to go into how we at Prognosis ingest the lab data, then how we'll consolidate coronavirus patient data into a nice report format for our clients. And then finally, I just wanted to throw out some discussion topics for what you guys think can be done with Prognosis generated report. So a little brainstorming session. Okay, so now I'm going to go into what clinical laboratory data is. So you can see in the slide here, I have 2 different lab report samples. Labs may be ordered by a doctor for routine checkup, like an annual CBC, CMP, or even to monitor a specific condition over time. So you can see how these reports vary a lot visually, which can actually be a source of confusion for patients because they may not be able to interpret the results easily if each lab report they're getting is different from the others, different formats, different layouts. So not only do they look different though, what's especially challenging for us is that the way they store their data electronically is also very inconsistent. So file formats, for example, we could be getting data in a CSV format from one lab and an HL7 format from another lab, for example. So we need to be able to process all these different file types the same way and consistent way so that we're getting accurate data. Along those lines, the file layouts also change a lot among labs. So for instance, the column names may change. One lab may send us the patient's result in a result column in, let's say, column A, and another lab may send us the result in a lab_result column in column X, for example. So we need to be able to pull that data in the same way for all the various lab formats. And also, on top of that, we may need to do some unit conversions to keep the results consistent. So for example, on the lab report on the right, you'll see, you'll see that the hemoglobin was measured in grams per deciliter for that lab, but another lab may report it to us in grams per liter. So we just need to have processes in place to convert those to one standard unit so that our deliverables that we send back to the client are more consistent and clean and easy to interpret. And the way we do all of this is through data analytics. Okay. So the lab partners send us data directly. So in that last example, one of the labs was called Moleculara. So Moleculara would be sending us their data directly in the raw file format. And the way they transfer those files to us is through a secure file transfer method that is HIPAA compliant, meaning that there are rules and procedures in place to protect patient data. And on top of that, to add another layer of security, the data they're sending us will be encrypted and de-identified. So you can see on the bottom right, I have a little graphic there just explaining what encryption is. And basically it is encoding the information to prevent anyone other than us at Prognos from seeing it. So in this specific example, the laptop on the left would be the lab, the hello would be the actual lab data, and the lab is encrypting that data with their public key to make it look like gibberish, basically, and unreadable. And only us at Prognos can decrypt that data with our private key to return that original message, which would be the lab data. And de-identification is the process of removing details about a patient that would allow us to know who that patient is. So we're doing everything possible that we can to keep patients' identities private and secure. So once we get that data and we decrypt that data, we're then going to transform and standardize it through an ETL process. So in the box on the left, that pulled that directly from our website. And actually, one of my colleagues on my team wrote up this report, this little infographic. So examples of how we transform the raw lab data. One thing we may do is harmonize the data. This means that we're creating one standard format for the lab data received from all the different labs. Another thing we're doing is cleaning the data. So we're combining or deleting duplicate records, we're removing the extraneous information or the incorrect information. So this makes it much easier for our client to interpret. Another thing we're doing is standardizing the data. So we're ensuring that the ICD codes, LOINC codes, result units, and test names are being reported in a consistent format. So we'll, in some cases, consolidate ICD codes, for example, because labs may have hundreds of different codes that mean basically the same thing, and we want to roll it up to what that broad condition is, because that's all the lab really cares about. And we'll also further enrich the data, so we're filling in incomplete data. And then finally, we are interpreting the data. So we're understanding the meaning of the results, and we're indicating if the results are normal or abnormal, or converting numeric results to high, medium, low. And we can do that through clinical algorithms, rather than going through one by one and saying, okay, this result means that the patient has a high result value. We have algorithms built by a clinical team that will automatically figure all this out for us. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about specifically coronavirus data. So what you've been waiting for this whole time, probably. So our job here is, for this project, this coronavirus project, is to consolidate a patient's coronavirus test results with their existing risk factors. So in the first box on the left, you'll see that we're identifying in the lab data using standardized coding systems such as LOINC codes, which will tell us what test was performed. So whether the patient is positive or negative, we want that full list of patients who were tested. Now in box 2, the non-coronavirus diagnoses. So on those same patients from the first box, we are pulling all the historical data on those patients. And we want to assess what chronic conditions they have. Sometimes the existing diagnoses will be recorded in the coronavirus result form itself. So we can actually see, okay, this patient had this coronavirus test, and at the bottom, it will say maybe, okay, this patient also has diabetes. So that's an easy way for us to determine that. But a more common and more challenging way is that we'll have to look in our past data in our database and pull all the records for that patient. Examples, CBCs, CMPs, like I mentioned before, maybe glucose testing. So we want to see if those results indicate the presence of other diseases. And we can do that through algorithms as well, clinical algorithms, and also through NLP. So pulling the words out of the report and saying, okay, this means that the patient has asthma, for example. And so our overall product will be a combination of coronavirus test result with their pre-existing conditions. Now, I want to point out that the conditions we're looking for when we look back in the historical data are the potential risk factors as outlined by the CDC. So I included here the comprehensive list, and I also included a couple of examples to go over quickly. So like asthma, heart disease, severe obesity, chronic kidney disease, COPD, all of these things can put the patient at higher risk for complications for coronavirus. So next, I'm going to just show a more visual depiction of this. So on the left, you'll see this is an extremely simplified version of what the lab will send to us. So in reality, this could be hundreds of columns long and it would be super messy. There would be missing values in columns and misspellings and just craziness. So what I've done here is just made it much more simplified to get the point across. So we'll get the patient's name, we'll say, the test code, and the test result. So in this case, A123 would signify that the patient had a coronavirus test. So this could be like a LOINC code, like I mentioned previously. And the test result column, self-explanatory, will be either positive or negative. Now we're looking to enhance that data. So you'll see on the right that I have the original 3 columns from the lab data. And on top of that, we're adding in our additional test codes for conditions that the patient has. So for example, B137 might signify chronic kidney disease. And I also want to point out, you'll see in the column name that there's a little plus sign. We're only looking at conditions that the patient has, conditions that the patient tested positive for. We don't care if the patient, like, let's say, was tested for diabetes but didn't have it. We only want to report if they have that condition. Okay. And then lastly, I just wanted to open it up for discussion. So there are a bunch of analytics that can be done with a Prognosis report. I thought of a couple myself. So how do coronavirus results vary with age? Which geographical areas are testing the most? And which comorbidities result in the highest death rates? So the top 2 I bolded because these are questions that can usually be answered from the Prognosis report alone. So when we're sending the report back, a lot of the times we are sending back date of births or ages because you can include that in data and it still be considered de-identified, because if you only have the birthday and the gender, you still have no idea of knowing who that patient is. Another thing, the geographical areas. So usually we'll send the address of the lab and or the address of the patient. So they can use that to track geographical areas. And then lastly, when I said here the death rates, that's something that we do not have access to. So we're sending this list of patients back. We have no idea whether they survived or sadly died. So the client may have access to that data though. So when we're sending back this data, the client may be able to map what we sent them to additional information they have on those patients. And from that, they would be able to gain insights on death rates from coronavirus based on patients' comorbidities. So yeah, that's it for me. We can't discuss this right now because we're going to do Q&A at the end, and Kate's going to present right now. But if you want to discuss on Slack or LinkedIn, or even ask some more questions about this in the Q&A, definitely willing to discuss further. Okay, so thank you, and Kate will be next.
Hi, everyone. So first, kudos to Jaclyn. I had no idea all of that went into absorbing and analyzing lab data, so that was super interesting. So I hope everyone is staying healthy and sane during this pandemic. I'm echoing what Irene said there, but I know that this is a tough time for everyone. So I hope everyone here today is doing all right or doing the best that you can. So today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics in the realm of analytics, which is visualization. And I'm hoping that I'm not alone here and that this is some of your favorite topics too. And if it's not, the chances that you come across this, whether you're a data scientist, a governance manager, or just getting started in your analytics career is extremely high. And if you haven't come across it yet, I promise that you will. So this is definitely an important topic for everyone, no matter who you are. And it's a fun opportunity for us as data professionals to blend our technical skills with our creativity to uncover insights about the data. So first, I will go over the power of data visualization, and then I will tell a quick story before I dive into the steps necessary to complete your analysis. I'll go over some good examples, and I will go over some not so good examples. But for those not so good examples, I'll be sure to give you tips to back out of that and make sure that you can have ways to enhance your analysis. I will conclude with the self-check that you can do before you call this word done. And I know that done isn't really a word, a real word in analytics. So we're gonna say done in quotation marks. So I'm sure that everyone in this audience understands the volume of data that's being collected on us as consumers. And as consumers, that's really scary. But as data scientists or as a data professional, that's really exciting. So with the vast sea of data that we have at our fingertips, it's becoming increasingly important to understand the power of visualization and to understand that our brains process visuals up to 60,000 times faster than text alone. So no more Excel reports with tables and tables of numbers, because your brain can't process that as quick. They do say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, or in this case, a data visualization is worth 60,000 words. So understanding how to create good data visualizations and the power of them is essential to your success as a data analytics professional. So before I jump in, I'm going to briefly discuss a story about 3 blind men and their first encounter with elephants. And if any of you are a Stephen Pugh fan, then you might have heard this story already. So the first man goes to meet the elephant and he touches his big, thick legs. And he doesn't feel anything else about the elephant. And he walks away knowing exactly what an elephant is like. It's like a forest with big, thick trees. The second man only feels the thin tail of the elephant swaying in the wind, and he compares it to a straw fan. The third man feels the long and strong trunk of the elephant and comes away thinking the elephant must be a relative of the snake. Now, none of these men are necessarily wrong here. The parts of the elephant that they encountered do resemble a fan, a tree trunk, and a snake, but they're only coming at it from a very narrow angle. And if they were to come at it from a different angle, they would have a completely different perspective. So I think you can see where I'm going with this and tying it back to data. Because of the volume of data that we have, there's so many different angles and perspectives that we can take, and so many insights that we can potentially walk away with. So we want to make sure that we're giving our audience, our stakeholders, our boss, a diverse set of data to make their decisions with. This brings us to our next discussion of how to stay on track during your visualization journey, because we want the full picture of the data, or at least as full as we can get. So this entire process that I'm showing here starts after we already understand our data and have engineered it into a workable source for data visualization. And prepping the data, transforming the data variables for data visualization, that's an entirely different lecture. So I'm not going to dive into any of that here. So we're going to start with a question, or essentially what we want to answer with our visualization or with our dashboard. What is the task at hand? What is being asked of us? And we want to make sure that we're getting really specific here. And getting really specific here will lead to a quicker and more efficient process. And then we go to the brainstorming phase. We create visualization upon visualization upon visualization. And it doesn't matter what tool you use here. It can be Matplotlib, it can be ggplot, you can use Tableau, or for this particular analysis, I'm going to use IBM Cognos Analytics. But in this brainstorming phase, it can get very easy to get lost. So I recommend you set a time limit in this phase, whether it's 20 minutes if you're on a short time frame, or 1 day, because like I said, it can get very easy to get lost here, and chances are you will get lost. So after this phase, I recommend you step away from your computer. Let the visualization stay on your screen and go grab some coffee. Or is your dog itching for a walk? Go bring your dog on a walk for 5 minutes around the block. After we get back from that walk, then we go to the innovation phase. And that's why it's important to come at this phase with a fresh mind. We want to think outside of the box here. Can we bring in additional data, or can we derive new variables with the data that we already have? Once we complete the innovation phase, we come back at the data, but this time with a greater purpose. And again, we visualize and create visualizations upon visualizations upon visualizations. But now with our newly acquired data, with our derived variables, or just with a fresh perspective. So here we're creating for purpose, and we're setting out to answer the question that we started with. Next, we do that self-test that I talked about. Is your dashboard actionable? Is it concise? Is it easily interpretable for the end audience? And if it is, then you have yourself a winner. If it's not, you might want to revisit or return to the innovation phase, or revisit your question entirely. This is an iterative process, so that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're a bad data visualization specialist. So first, before I dive into the COVID data, I'm going to start by showing a really pretty bad visualization, and with a very basic question that doesn't get specific. And then I'll improve the analysis as we go on. So the question here that I'm set out to address is, when can our company start opening our businesses up again? From this visualization here, we can see that we're looking at the confirmed cases of COVID-19 by county. So we can see when we're looking at it from a volume perspective, the entire US looks pretty similar, except that we can see the cases with the counties with higher volume are New York, Cook, Illinois, and Los Angeles. But what does that really show us if we know that these are some of the most populated counties in the US? Not much. So I created visualization upon visualization, and I'm feeling a little stuck. I need to improve my map. I need to think about other data that I can bring in. And I see my dog sitting next to me, itching to go on for a walk. So now it's time that I step away from my computer and bring Finn on a 10-minute walk. Okay, I just got back from my walk with my dog, and now I'm ready to look at this again. How can I help these executives at my company address when to start opening up businesses? This break gave me the realization that population data would enhance the last visualization I just showed, and that mobility and forecast data would really help me assess when a region is returning to normalcy. So I start to look at the mobility data. This data uses a combination of data from Google, Facebook, Descartes Labs, and SafeGraph about an individual's mobility. From all of these data sources, we derive a composite mobility indicator for each state. Each data from each of these 4 sources is standardized and averaged to give us a composite time series of variance from average mobility by each state. So if we're talking variance here, because everyone in the US is currently very immobile, all of these variances are going to be negative because we're a lot lower than the average mobility for each state. So I know that this is a lot to take in with the standardization composites. And we know that a picture is worth 1,000 words now. So I'm going to go right ahead and show you the data visualization. So for this visualization, we're using the current mobility for each state as a proxy for when this state is going to return to normalcy. How mobile is each state compared to its average mobility? And this really helps us compare the mobility state to state. So our boss and our stakeholders can start to address when a location is being more mobile. And we wouldn't want to send consumers to open stores and send consumers to stores if they're not being mobile and that's not the actions that they're taking in their state. So when we're looking at this map, we can see using the legend at the top that lighter states are further from their average mobility. And we can see that darker states are closer to their average mobility based on this heat mapping scale. So we can see New York, very immobile. Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, pretty mobile. Maybe the darker states are what we want to focus on when we start to open up our state, to open up our businesses, I'm sorry. So next, I started to look at the forecast data. And this is the IHME forecasted data that takes into account the Johns Hopkins data that I showed you at the beginning, different policy data, mobility data, and hospitalizations data to create a time series forecast of daily deaths by state. And for the purpose of our analysis, we will focus on a derived field, which is created from the date of peak deaths by state. So we take this peak day per state and count the numbers of days away from that peak. We're talking about derived fields that can get a little tricky to talk about. So let's say we take New York as an example. Let's say hypothetically, New York's peak was in 2 days. New York's value for that peak days away, from peak will be 2. Let's say we have Arizona and their peak was 45 days ago in the past. Then that number for Arizona will be -45. So this new field will help us to see where a state is at in flattening their curve, and if they're past their peak or if their peak is yet to come. And they're consistently optimizing this model and adding in more inputs to improve the model's predictions. And if you're interested in what they're doing with this model, you can find more about it at healthdata.org. So we're using days from the peak's projected peak as a proxy to say how far is each state from its peak deaths. So we can see from the legend at the top left that states that are darker green have their peak date in the past. That means that they're moving away from their peak. They're closer to returning to normalcy. And the states that are red have their peak date in the future. So this visualization would allow us to make decisions about reopening stores state to state, as we would want to focus our attention on the green states and steer clear of the states that have not arrived at their peak date yet. So now I revisit my initial visualization. When will each county begin their return to normalcy using the per capita cases data? So now I created a derived or a calculated value based on the number of cases by county divided by the county's population. And I time that number by 100,000, just so that the numbers aren't so small. So we can start to see the areas that are shown darker on this map have the most cases proportionally to their population, not just the most cases overall, which is what we saw in our first visualization. This helps us to show the impact relative to each county. So now if we take a combination Of the 3 visualizations that I showed you, we can start to glean insights and focus on states that have the smallest variance from their average mobility, have their peak date far behind them. And once we nail down a few states that cross those boxes, we can drill into the states at the county level to see which county in these states were the least impacted. Those are the areas that we want to focus on and start to open our stores. And New York doesn't look half so bad now, does it? There's definitely areas that are looking worse than New York now. So once I completed my data visualization process, I go to my self-check. And this is what I like to call the so what test. This will help you assess your visualization and improve it if needed. You're essentially looking at your visualization and saying, so what? And you're supposed to be able to answer that question because you're supposed to walk away with actionable insights from your visualization or from your dashboard. So the first check is, does your visualization answer your initial question? Our initial question was, when can we start to reopen our businesses? We have a perfect answer. We're going to open them in phases, first focusing on states that are furthest from their death peaks and have the smallest variance from their average mobility. And once we have a few states picked out, we can look at the county level visualization that we created to pick counties in the state that were the least impacted. That's where we're going to start reopening our businesses. Next, did you think outside of the box? Of course we did. We brought in data from Google, Descartes Lab, Facebook. We brought in population data. The only task at hand was to figure out when we can open our businesses, and we went outside of the box here, so we can check that. Next, if you had to pay for real estate on the dashboard, did you make good use of your money? You don't want to have anything on your dashboard or on your visualization that isn't adding value. Everything on your dashboard or visualization should be helping the audience better interpret the visualization. So real estate's important here. And lastly, does your visualization lead to actionable insights? And since we checked all of those boxes, we're safe to hit send and get this off to our boss for his feedback. So that's it, just a quick overview of the data visualization process and how I went through it to analyze the COVID data for VSP Global. So I hope everyone has found this useful and learned a thing or two. If you have any questions that don't get answered during this upcoming Q&A, I'd love to connect further, either on our Slack channel or via LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right, awesome job, Jaclyn and Kait. Hey everyone, I'm Ann Bodie. I'm Irene's co-lead of the New York chapter, and I'll be moderating the Q&A section of tonight's event. So everyone can start submitting questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can submit anonymously, you can upvote other questions, all that. So if you upvote, that'll be really helpful because that way we make sure that we address the questions that are most relevant to everybody in the webinar. So if you want to see all of the panelists at once, just a heads up, you can go to the view options at the top of your screen and select side-by-side mode, because some of these questions we're going to address to the whole New York team, not necessarily just the 2 speakers. And while we wait for Q&A submissions, I'll kick off with a couple of questions to start. So this one is kind of for everybody. What resources do you recommend to use if you're looking to learn new skills during this quarantine? And I'll very quickly say that what's been helping me is I've been doing IBM's Data Science Professional Certificate on Coursera. So it's pretty affordable and a really good way to broaden my skill set. I'm learning SQL, visualization, things like that. So that's from me, but maybe Kait, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I can further add to that. So I would say you guys are already one step in the right direction. So attending presentations and webinars like this is really going to expand your breadth of knowledge about the data analytics area. So if you hear something that you liked, maybe go off and start to analyze the COVID data on your own, or like Anne said, try a Kaggle competition or look up different articles and see what different analytics professionals are doing and try and emulate them. I think there's so many resources out there because there's such a big community of techies that we're in. So I think that if you do a quick Google search for something that you're interested in and find data, that's definitely a great place to start.
All right, does anyone else on the team, maybe either Irene or Jaclyn?
Yeah, I can add into that. So I actually was a biology major in undergrad, and all the coding I know I've taught myself. So I would say for me, a good way to do this was, good way to learn, was to really just hit Google, type in what you want to learn. Do I want to know Python? Do I want to know SQL? There's so many resources. There's not really one that I would recommend because everything is so great in their own different ways. But I would like to point out that it's good to practice. So there are a lot of courses where you just watch the videos and maybe you'll take some notes, but until you actually apply it, it's probably not going to sink in. So definitely make sure you're not only learning, but also applying.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, just to echo that, you know, I've done a more formal boot camp where there's like actually infrastructure and you've got these things that are due, so there's urgency. That was really helpful for me because it sort of gave me that sense of like, okay, I need to do this and I need to like explain how I did this to someone else that's judging me. So that was really helpful because it gave me kind of that, that urgency. But also like, one of the things that excites me most about like the days that we are living in right now is that like you literally can learn anything. So if you do want to get more technical and be like a data engineer, like there's so many resources where you can find projects online, do things online, meet people like all across the world that will like work on projects with you. So you have some camaraderie and companionship. So like whatever, choose your own adventure, whatever is exciting to you, like just do that because there are so many avenues right now.
Okay, thanks guys. So the most upvoted question right now is, please recommend a reliable data source to extract COVID-19 data. And before I go to our speakers, I know that I think a lot of big companies are trying to provide their data in a way that people like us who just want to make visualizations or just practice their data science skills can start using it. So I know even Apple, they have an easy site where you can download a CSV file that will tell you benchmarked to some day in January what percent of Apple Maps usage you're at in all different cities. So like in New York, you could see that biking was down, but subway searches on Apple Maps were down way more. We were at like 20% of January's capacity. So I think that there's a lot of places that you wouldn't really expect that you could get cool data about COVID-19 from. So I think large companies are starting to offer that. And I know Johns Hopkins has been very much referenced. But Jaclyn and Kait, do you guys have any other sources specifically that you would recommend people go to?
Yeah, I used the Johns Hopkins data for a lot of this analysis that I showed, and I also used data from the IHME at the University of Washington. So those are two great resources, and they're consistently iterating what they're doing. So they're improving on it. They're adding new fields. So I think that that's definitely a great place to start.
Yeah, and I think each state is releasing data on coronavirus. I know specifically New York is, because I was tracking for a little while when the pandemic first started. They had graphs of how many new cases. They break it down by borough, by county. So yeah, I think that's definitely a reliable source. I'm just not sure if every state is doing that, but that's definitely worth checking out.
All right, cool. So the next one is, where do you get inspiration for creative data visualizations? So maybe we'll direct this to Kait because she had a lot of those.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So if I'm feeling stuck, like I told you, I normally step away from my computer. And then when I come back, I normally think about the question that I'm trying to answer first. And then I don't go to my analytics tool to try and create visualizations. I normally map it out, draw it out. So if I'm trying to analyze what's the increase of hand sanitizer year over year, and I'm trying to think what's the best way to create creative and innovative data visualization, I normally draw it out if I'm really stuck before I even go to any data visualization tool that I'm using, because then you start to think outside of the box. And you can also do a Google search of data visualizations to spark innovation. I like to do that too. So those are just a few tips that I do.
So I know, Irene, you have been building a portfolio in Tableau Public. So we have a question about that. So maybe, and I think the two kind of go together. So first of all, Irene, how do you come up with what maybe personal projects you want to be working on in Tableau Public as you build your portfolio? And then Kait, maybe you could just follow up with, so we had a question, can the visualization shared by Kait, could that be something generated in Tableau Public? So the two of you could talk about that.
Yeah, as far as the first part of that question, I love getting inspired by Tableau Public because everyone has their own portfolios publicly available. And I just, like, we had one of our speakers from last session, Lindsay, she had a beautiful profile, and I was able to see all the cool stuff that she's been able to come up with, and it was so inspiring. And I was like, okay, I'm so doing this, and I hadn't really played around with it much before that. And then I realized, wow, like every portfolio that I find, if there's something cool that I haven't seen before, like, you know, I like this idea of us being inspired by each other and not having that be like, oh, you're stealing someone's design. Instead, you're like making it your own, you know, and incorporating it into your own work in your own way. And I think that's the way we collaborate. So, yeah.
Okay, so I can answer the question about if all the visualizations can be recreated in Tableau Public. I didn't try to recreate anything in Tableau Public, so I cannot say for certain, but I use some pretty basic geospatial mapping here, so I would assume that the answer is yes. And if you have any questions as you're going through the process, feel free to reach out and I can help you recreate it in Tableau Public.
Great, thanks guys. All right, so this one is for Jaclyn specifically. Since Prognosis receives data from multiple labs, how often did you have to change your standardization mapping for each source? And also, what tools do you use for that?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm on the QA team. I'm not in charge of the actual algorithms that we do, but we do work a lot in Scala, Spark, and SQL to do these types of things. And I know for certain what we'll do is we'll monitor the data that's coming in from a specific lab, and we'll do checks that pick up any new test codes that were added to the data that we're receiving this week. So we receive data on a weekly basis. And if there are new test codes, we'll go through all those new test codes that came in, and we'll determine whether or not these need to be added to our reports. So it changes a lot. They'll even just add on one word, maybe like in blood, as opposed to just the result itself, even though the result is in blood. So those little things we have to watch out for. Even if the lab suddenly decides to capitalize something, that's another thing we have to look out for. So like I said, we'll look at any additional test codes that we've never seen before, see if they should be caught up in a report. And if so, the clinical team will add those new test codes into the report so that it gets picked up next time. And as far as new units of measure, that's also handled by the clinical team. They will analyze the unit of measure and how to convert that from one unit to another. And yeah, they're great. They're a super smart team, and they're the ones handling most of this stuff.
All right, thanks, Jaclyn. So I just want to point out that we had someone in the chat point out that there's a good site to get visualization ideas, which I have heard of before. So I think it's pretty popular, makeovermonday.co.uk. So make sure that you check that out if you're interested in building a portfolio of cool visualizations. So I'll give you guys a little bit of time if you have any other questions to submit in the chat, or in the Q&A section. But I'll just ask one more for our speakers. So what would you say are the major challenges that you face when performing this type of work, and what are the skills that you think are most important? So maybe Jaclyn, since you're already on screen, do you want to start out?
Yeah, so what was the first part? It was what skills are important.
Yeah, what challenges you face when doing this type of work and what skills you need.
So I think a challenge that I face a lot comes from the inconsistencies and the processes not working correctly when we do our transformations. So as someone on the QA team, I'm constantly looking for things that the algorithms and the analytics processes do wrong. So all the automated processes, of course, you can't depend on them 100%. So I'm the one that has to say, okay, this should have been this went wrong. So a skill that's really important for that is attention to detail, definitely. So you really need to dive into it and be willing to look at it from every perspective and look at it, for a really long time too, because sometimes it's not easy to pick up these things. So you can't be rushed, you can't be lazy, you need to really focus and dive in.
All right, cool. And Kait, what about
And
you?
I think going off of that, because the world of data is changing so rapidly, there's new tools, new algorithms that we can use, and the data is constantly changing. You have to be okay with failing and fail quick. So you might create a dashboard and it might not be that good, but based on the feedback you get from a coworker or from your boss, as long as you're failing quick and willing to improve it, willing to learn from the process, then I think that you're going in the right direction. So I think give it your all. If you fail quick and move on, because you're going to fail. You're not going to be perfect at everything. So I think having that realization that it will happen really helps you be more confident throughout the whole process.
All right. So there aren't any more questions in the Q&A section, and I want to make sure that we end on time. So I'm just going to give you guys, maybe if we could go to the last slide, just a little more information. So before we go, I just want to thank Jaclyn and Kait one more time for their awesome presentations tonight. And there is someone driving past my apartment playing music very loudly, so I apologize if you can hear that. But make sure before you leave that you know how to connect with us on social media. We have a really active Slack community, which, as Irene said, is growing internationally, and it's especially active during this quarantine time. I think we have over 800 people in the general channel, and everyone's introducing themselves, talking about their skills, what they're looking for, collaborating, job opportunities. So it's a really great place to join. And Kait is going to send a link for that in the chat to everyone if she hasn't done that already. And we also have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and a YouTube channel with a ton of new videos being posted each week. And so you can just go to YouTube, just look up Women in Data and check out our channel. A lot of events like the one from tonight are being recorded and being uploaded to the channel, so you can check out all different Women in Data chapters around the country, their events during this time as you try to learn more. And then finally, if you want to just get in touch with us more directly and you prefer not to use Slack, you can definitely email us at nycchapter@womenindata.org. And with that, I think that's everything you need in order to stay connected with Women in Data. So thank you all so much for joining, and I hope that you learned something.